And it's
Hello.
well, hello everyone, and welcome to CoachX Live with the Institute of Coaching. My name is Jeff Hull. I am the Executive Director with the Institute of Coaching, and I am super excited to be here with one of my favorite thought leaders and one of the leaders of our premier sponsor organization, Better Up at the Institute of Coaching. Gabriella Kellerman is here with me today. And I'm sure many of you have heard of her because she and Marty Seligman, the famous psychologist around positive psychology, have a new book out called Tomorrowmind, which I highly, highly, highly recommend. And we're going to be diving into this book and diving into the work that she and Marty have been doing for the last 5 or 6 years together over the next few minutes. So I just want to welcome everyone from around the world and take a minute and say hello. Let's hope the comment section is working for us today. But love to see where people are coming in from. And we will try to get to as many of your questions as possible. So for those of you who don't know Gabriella, let me just give you a quick summation of her amazingly extensive background. This is going to be just a snippet because I want to jump into our conversation, but you really need to hear a little bit more about Gabriella. So she's an author, obviously, of this new book, Tomorrowmind, with Marty Seligman. She's an entrepreneur. She has been a startup executive earlier in her career. She's a Harvard-trained doctor, yes, a real physician, with expertise in behavioral and organizational change. She's an expert in digital health, well-being, and also artificial intelligence. She has served as the Chief Product Officer and the Chief Innovation Officer at Better Up, which, as many of you know, is a huge coaching firm and a transformation platform for global professionals. And she's has been the head of Better Up Labs, Better Up's research arm, which studies whole person development in partnership with labs at the Harvard University, the University of Pennsylvania, Stanford, and many other organizations. So needless to say, Gabriella is a seasoned thought leader in this area of human development and the connection between technology, artificial intelligence, and coaching. So I am super excited to have you here, Gabriella. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for that very generous introduction, Jeff. It's great to be with you.
Great to be with you. And I'd love to get us started as people kind of come in from all over. So you can already see folks from Nigeria are joining us. Amazing. South Africa. Yeah, so it's wonderful to have such an international audience. And I'd love for you to start with a little bit of background. Because Tomorrowmind is really a fabulous new book, but it came out of quite a bit of research. So maybe tell us a little bit of the background of what prompted you to do the work that led ultimately to this book.
Yeah, happy to. So Marty and I have been researching together for 6 years now under the umbrella of Better Up Labs, which is the research arm of Better Up. With his team, with our team at Better Up, collaborating with other labs around the world and other tremendous researchers. And the goal of the lab is really to understand what are the challenges for individuals looking to thrive at work today. What is the science we have to help us with those challenges? And then to fill the gaps in terms of both science and interventions we need to help people grow in those critical areas. And with the science that we have accumulated, we've published academically, we've published popular papers. We, of course, apply that and train our coaches in it. But each of those is sort of one piece of the puzzle. And after a certain number of years together, a certain volume of research, we're starting to formulate kind of a bigger perspective on those questions that was just best suited to a book. I will say, we actually intended originally to write this book for coaches. It was going to be a coaching guide, and we actually have written a coaching guide now to the book. But the original vision was, let's arm coaches with this knowledge specifically. And as we got into it, for a number of reasons, we felt like we were doing coaches a disservice by not first putting something out there into the world that coachees could also read. So take some of the burden of education off of the coach's shoulders by getting a baseline of knowledge out to everyone. And then it's really on top of that baseline of knowledge where coaches become so powerful in driving that change.
Yeah, I love that because I think, a lot of your research was formulated early with Marty through BetterUp, right? Which is a big coaching company. So it makes sense that you would be thinking of a target audience as coaches. But having read the book and having talked with you earlier about this, I mean, it's a broad subject that really focuses in on sort of what I would consider to be the next generation of human development. I mean, we have the work from Scott Barry Kaufman, for example, around self-actualization. And then you guys take this work to a whole new level. And I particularly love that you focus in on 5 particular domains, I guess you would call them. And I know your acronym is Prism, even though it's not particularly, it's not actually in order, right? But it's not so much a matter of the word as it is those particular domains that you focus in on. So for those that haven't read the book, maybe it would be good for you to just give a quick summary, because they're really key, I think, for those of us as coaches to at least have a basic understanding of what these particular domains are that came out of your research.
Yeah. So, in coaching, we love a good acronym.
Right.
And so I'll just share quickly that we had decided on these 5 skills. Again, it emerged out of all of this years of research. We wrote the whole book, every single chapter. We had no acronym. And Marty kept saying, we really need an acronym. So we put out a challenge to friends and family. And it was my dad who came up with the acronym
Really?
Prism. Yeah. He's a nuclear physicist, appropriately enough, that's the word he came up with. So PRISM. As you said, Jeff, in the book, the order is different. It's RMSPI in the book, but that's not an acronym.
So you decided not to change the order of the domain.
We didn't change the order of the book. And the truth is the order of the book is really the order that I would think about for coaching. The R is resilience. It's very foundational. People who are really struggling, that's where you want to start with them and draw their attention, and mattering layers onto that. That's the M, and social support and so on. But I can just quickly tell you what the PRISM stands for. So P is prospection, which is our ability to imagine and plan for the future. It's so much of what coaching is inherently about. It's also a really critical skill for thriving in an era of uncertainty. The R, as I said, is resilience. So as we're facing challenge after challenge, how do we not just bounce back from the challenge, which is typically how we think about resilience, but how do we actually grow stronger because of the challenge? How do we turn that challenge into a source of growth? The I is innovation. So we have a whole chapter on creativity, on innovation, on this innovation imperative. And more we see people coming into coaching looking for help as creative leaders, as leaders looking to foster innovation on their teams. And there's a need to help people self-identify. Very few people today self-identify as creative, considering that we all have that same creativity hardware and software where, we all have that as part of our species. So it's really the science of how do you build that both as individuals and as leaders. The S in Prism is social connection. A huge part of our well-being, as we all know. It's also a huge part of what it takes to be successful at work, because our work is done through collaboration, which necessitates connection. And also increasingly, those of us who are involved in customer service, the stakes of connection get higher and higher for that service as AI takes on more and more of the less connected parts of our work. And so we introduced this idea of rapid rapport, which is how do we quickly build trust across difference, both with collaborators and with customers. And then the M in Prism is for mattering, which is what we consider almost a bare minimum level of meaning and purpose that we need to find in our work. It's also a bare minimum of what leaders need to give to the people on their team. And as coaches, we so often encounter people with a crisis of mattering, or people trying to lead through a crisis of mattering. And so we're naming that, we're lowering the bar in some ways to mattering from meaning. And there's reasons we're doing that very intentionally that we can talk about, but also then providing tools to help people both as individuals and as leaders with that dimension.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that, for going through that. I mean, there's so much behind each one of those, but I think it gives people at least a landscape to start from. So when you dig in with the book to learn more, you'll know that these are sort of the key takeaways from a lot of the research. So a lot of folks are coming in right now, and I just want to remind everyone that we do have about 20 minutes. So if you have a question for Gabriella, let us know, and I will try to get to it. So I am really interested. So I'm lucky enough that I get to ask the first questions. So one thing that always interested me as I was reading the book and had the opportunity to see you and Marty speak at the book, what do you call it? The
Launch
the book launch. That's the word. Sorry. Is that when you talked about prospection, I know I was listening to this projecting into the future, and it's a really important element of your different domains of research. And I was wanting to ask you, what is the difference in your mind between that and visioning? Because I think for us as coaches, a lot of what we do with our clients, we call visioning, whether it's a vision for a leader or a vision for a client. So how would you distinguish that from perspective?
So visioning is a really important piece of prospection. Right. Okay. And there are lots of different coaching frameworks that overlie on prospection in interesting ways. And actually in that guide that I mentioned, we go through some of that. But let me take a step back and just explain one of the basic ways that prospection works. And then we can think about how to overlay different coaching frameworks on top of that. So prospection happens in two phases. So there's an immediate fast phase of prospection, which is where we just begin to think about something in the future. It's typically optimistic. It's divergent. That's where a lot of the visioning work tends to come from. Right. The second phase is slower. It's more deliberative, more evaluative, and it can tend toward the pessimistic. And that's where we now sort of shift from this like hopeful, optimistic excitement to really evaluating. And for some people can even turn into catastrophizing. So when we work with people on prospection, we're trying to help them build skills in both of those phases. So in the first phase, we want to make sure people are thinking divergently enough. We want to make sure that they are enjoying that optimism, because the optimism is so healthy and important in motivating us, right? And then when we get into the second phase, we want to make sure we're using, all the great skills of coaching to help people think logically, to help people weigh pros and cons, to help people learn from the emotions that come up when they imagine those different possibilities. And one of the ways of thinking about what does it look like to have done really great prospection about a future possibility is that you can now imagine an array of possibilities going from, maybe the hardest to the most optimistic. You have against those a sense in your mind of how probable are each of those things, and you're able to deploy resources accordingly to prepare for those different possibilities. The ones that are most likely, you want to start really preparing for those. The ones that are least likely, if it's something you want to make happen, maybe you're deploying resources there. But the ones that are least likely and you hope that they just don't happen, you keep an eye on that, but you're not going to devote a ton of attention to it. So as an individual, as a team, as an organization, we're not trying to predict which of those things is going to happen, but we're trying to be centered against this probabilistic array. It gives us a lot more agility, a lot more sense of agency in an environment where the change is just constantly coming at us, and we're liable to feel victim instead of, this really helps us feel empowered.
I love that. So what you're also saying is that prospection has both a pragmatic aspect to it and in some ways a deeper view than just visioning, because visioning is almost like a fantasy, right? And when you get into that second layer of prospection, it's actually some of the risks, some of the emotions, some of the challenges or obstacles that might come up, which could actually be very powerful for coaching. Because
Right.
a vision is just like a picture. And
And
that,
I think it's important to also draw the distinction. That's exactly right, Jeff. To draw the distinction between, are we helping someone vision because they're trying to imagine what they want their future to be, versus is it an exercise of there's change coming and I need to be able to get ahead of that change in some way. And those are different,
right,
forcing functions for prospection, and they'll lead you to different approaches here. But a lot of the muscle is going to be the same in terms of being able to be open and optimistic and excited in the face of new possibilities, but also to be prepared, to be realistic, to be, allocating resources against this array of possibilities. Pragmatic prospection is actually the way that we talk about this, and it was our colleague Roy Baumeister who coined that term, pragmatic prospection, as a
oh,
way of
okay.
saying there's actually a really effective way of prospecting that we can train people in. And we have a new paper coming out on this. It was just accepted, so I will send over the link when that is published. And it's all about pragmatic prospection, and there's a piece about it, a coaching in it as well. So we can share that out when that's live.
Oh, great. Where is it going to be published? Do you know?
I think it's the journal Positive Psychology. I can check
Well,
real quick, and
that would make sense.
yeah, let me check on that real quick so I don't give everyone false information.
No worries.
While we're chatting, I can check on that.
So the biggest question that I could ask already came up, so I think I might as well go for an honor. Her name is Saren
Sorry,
Silva. Go ahead.
it's a journal called Advances where it will be published.
Excellent. And is
Yeah.
that connected to positive psychology at all, or is it completely separate?
It's its own journal.
Oh,
It's
okay.
called Advances in Motivation Science.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll follow up with you to make sure we get it. So what I was going to ask you is Saren Silva has already asked the penultimate question, so I thought I might as well go for it, which is your biggest takeaway from all the research that you did.
It's really hard to choose one, Saren.
I can
So,
imagine.
thanks for challenging me. Okay, I will say that the message that I try to reinforce the most is maybe the best way to answer that. Um, and as coaches, I think it's super important. The world that we live in, we use in the book this metaphor of the whitewater world of work, which
Right.
it comes from our collaborator, John Seely Brown. It's this idea that maybe a long time ago, work was like boarding in a steamship and you were on a steady, in this one company working toward a steady horizon. Then it became more like tacking in a sailboat, and there was a little bit more change and you need a little bit more agility. Today, because the forces of change and globalization are coming so fast, we're all like whitewater kayakers alone,
Right.
constantly navigating the tide, trying to see ahead via prospection, but also somewhat overwhelmed by the immediate riptides around us, right? So there's that sense of it's always there all the time. And that the whitewater is what we're on for our careers. So the entirety of our careers, we're on that river. It may slow down a little. We may decide to get off the river and take a pause in working. But as long as we're working for, modern competing companies, that's what it feels like. And so the takeaway is that at any given moment, we ourselves or our coachees, we're in a particular set of rapids, and it can be very tempting to focus in all of our energies on that moment and that crisis and those rapids. But in fact, the project is about the river. The project is about
Mm,
rapids after rapids after rapids, and building the skills to be able to go from one to the other to the other. And I
right.
think that shift, it takes time to get people there to really help them understand it. It's very grounding. It puts things in perspective. But again, it then reframes how we want to focus skill building, how we want to focus where our energies go, because we're not just trying to get through this crisis, right? That recipe of like living from one crisis to the next, that's how we get into burnout. That's
Yep.
how we get into low well-being. We don't perform well, versus if we can zoom out and prepare for this, lifetime of kayaking in the whitewater. That's really the message and the key takeaway that I try to apply in my own life, and I try to apply with those that I work with as well.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. I think there's something there about grounding and adapting, and there's a fluidity like the fluidity is all around us, but then we also have to incorporate a level of fluidity within us. And that's
Yeah.
what you're pointing to. So that was really beautiful. And as Saren is pointing out in the chat, resilience is really a key, which is one of your key domains
That's
in
right.
the Prism model, right? Building that muscle of being able to deal with the waves of the whitewater, so to speak.
It's absolutely, it's the very first skill in the book is resilience. And we break down these 5 drivers and how to develop those in yourself or in those you coach. Without that, we're sunk, really. So that is the place we have to start. And that's why it's first in the book.
That's great. So given that context, I would love for you to share your perspective on the whitewater of artificial intelligence also, because I think this is, one of the disruptions that we're all feeling, and we're unclear about what it's going to mean for coaches and what it's going to mean for our clients. But I also know that in your domains, mattering and social support and resilience have a lot to do with human connectivity in a very deep way. And you get into that a lot in the book. And so I'm curious where you would speak to how we're all responding or how we're all reflecting on the artificial intelligence that's bubbling up just since I saw you 4 months ago. I mean, it's really like happening. Talk about whitewater, right? So I'd love to hear your current thoughts on how we as coaches and leaders respond to this kind of whitewater.
Yeah. Okay. So the first is I think we can go back to that whitewater metaphor with AI and say, we've been in the whitewater of AI for a decade or more in pretty fundamental ways.
Sure.
And AI has been all around us. And, many folks who've had AI involved in their job or sort of take over part of their job, they actually have welcomed it over the years. It takes on things they really don't want to do anyway. So there's
True.
lots of good stuff that's happened through AI. We're in a particular moment of rapids right now that's scary, and we don't know, quite what it means. And it is a bigger challenge. I think, all of this technology and AI is one piece of it, or maybe just one sort of large category of it is it's been changing. It's a big part of what fuels the whitewater. And these are the skills intended to help us with all of that. We are in a phase that in some ways, it can feel that this AI is dehumanizing or it's devaluing what we have to offer as humans. On the other end, it really highlights what only we can offer, and I will tell you, when I first met Marty, his question to me, and this was 6 years ago, was, what is the one question scientifically you'd really love to answer over the course of working with Better Up Labs? And what I said to him was, how is it that one human being helps another? Why is it so essential that we need another human being to help us grow, help us change, help us feel supported and connected? And that is still my question. And that is still, we have no evidence that AI can form that rapport and that connection and support us in that way. And so I think, again, that is being brought into greater and greater relief. And if we look at it that way, this allows us to lean into those very deeply human parts of our job and our work, especially as coaches, and think about what is it that I as a human can provide someone versus, a schedule or some other tactical pieces that do occupy our time, but we don't really want it to. So I think that is part of the perspective to bring to all of this. I also think that in the spirit of what we're all trying to accomplish in terms of helping people thrive and grow, these tools can do that, right? There's a lot they can do to make interventions more scalable. They can't replace a human and human connection, but they can help people build skills. There's ways that they can help us accelerate our work, and that's what I'm really interested in figuring out and doing. And I think that to elevate the world's consciousness, to elevate the level of well-being in the world, we need tools that will be as scalable as possible, in addition to, as an adjunct to the engine of human to human connection and support, which is still the piece that, is most fundamental, most impactful.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think what you're talking about is this rather complex animal of scaling humanity using artificial intelligence, but not losing our humanity along the way, right? Actually deepening our humanity. And that's almost like a bit of a conundrum, because I know even Better Up is very much committed to using technology to scale, but not losing the human and the identity of humanity that's connected. Because as you said, that's what really builds resilience and health and wellness and thriving.
And if you think about it historically, and we make this point in the book, the previous major labor transformation, and you could argue about different varieties of what and where that was. But if you look back to the Industrial Revolution, right, where we went from being agriculturalists to working in factories, that was a deeply dehumanizing transformation. There was tons of innovation to create the factory and the machines, but then once you were working on it, it really didn't take creativity or innovation or prospection. It was very mechanical. And so one of the points we make in the book is that a hopeful way of thinking about today is these tools now, they are able to do that dehumanizing labor on their own in many ways. And the fact that we need to be innovators, we need to be prospective, that is in a way a return to some of these very deeply human capabilities. And so that's also where I really love leaning into these skills around innovation, which is so good for our well-being. It's something that, we can help teach people. There's a huge component of how do we lead through innovation? How do we coach leaders to lead through innovation? That has to do with how we treat each other. It has to do with how we listen to each other's ideas. So I feel like there's actually a real opportunity to see today's world of work as rehumanizing after many centuries of a very dehumanizing labor environment.
I totally agree. So beautifully said. So as always, we're going to run out of time soon, but I would really love for you to comment. I mean, the book's been out since January, I think, February, something like that. And I'm sure you've been giving talks to coaches. I know you're going to give one to ours next August 2nd, right? You're going to be a deep dive webinar for everyone here. Please make sure you join us on August 2nd at the Institute of Coaching for a webinar with Gabriella. But I'm curious, what are coaches, what are they really asking you when they get an opportunity to talk to you about the book and the research that you did?
Yeah, I think the question is that I get most often is, how do I apply Prism as a framework to coaching? And it's a great question. I would say that the intention, and we can talk about this more on August 2nd, is similar to PERMA, which someone put it in the chat. I appreciate PERMA is an acronym around well-being. It's building blocks of well-being.
Right. That was Marty way back, right? When he first framed positive psychology as a set of research-based domains. Yeah.
Exactly. And so Prism is now applying that into the workplace and saying, if we want to thrive in the workplace, what are those skills? This is a way of looking at the portfolio of skills that your coachee does or doesn't have, and to think about what are the ones that could be helpful to them, both based on their needs and their existing skill set and on the challenges that we're facing. And so there's certain types of questions and challenges that they could be working on that would tell you, oh, there's a crisis of mattering. Okay, let's work on mattering. There's other challenges that might tell you, oh, this person's really foundering with prospection. Okay, let's work on prospection. And as I said at the beginning, for many people, it's all going to come down to resilience and just building that to begin with, and they're really struggling. So it's really this, again, portfolio approach of these are the skills they're going to need to be their most fully successful, but also fully human in this world of work that's going to be with us for many generations to come. And being able to do a little bit of a diagnostic as you're working with them against those 5.
Yeah, that's actually really key. As you were answering, I was thinking about how I've used this work with my clients. And I have to say, I don't read very many books twice, but I actually read the book when I went to the book launch, and then I have gone back to it a number of times. So I just want to encourage everyone, these domains, the research behind it, not only is it super impressive, but to your point, Gabriella, it's actually really helpful when you're thinking about what your client needs. And it often ends up in one of these areas where they're feeling like what they do doesn't matter. They're in burnout, or they're not bouncing back, which is resilience, or they're feeling kind of alone on their journey, which is the social support, or they think they're creative, but then as I've read some of these amazing sections in your book on innovation, and I poke my clients a little bit about whether all the ways they could be creative, deepening, right? So just to share that's how I've used the book myself. And we're going to run out of time, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We didn't get to every question, and they will be on LinkedIn. So hopefully Gabriella will take a minute to respond to some of the ones we didn't get to. But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. It's a super book. I love your work. I am so excited that you're going to come back August 2nd. Please sign up, everyone, to be with us, because we'll have a full hour together with Gabriella to take a deeper dive.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in from
Great seeing you,
around the world.
everyone. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.